Welcome to Shad's Guitar Show. Whether it's the gear or the players who made the gear famous, join me each episode as we discuss all things guitar. Well, hey there, and welcome into another exciting episode of Shad's Guitar Show. So glad, as I always say, to have you with me today for another discussion about a great player this time. And somebody that I've recently just started getting into. Now, it's a player that I've heard of for a long, long time. And certainly the name, will, resonate with you as well. I'm sure that you've heard of this player, but I never really got much into him. But as I began to really look at the influences of the guitar players that I really listen to on a regular basis, his name just continues to come up time and time again. And as I've learned in researching him and studying him, he really truly is kind of, ground zero for the blues rock or, blues electric guitar sound. So yeah, join me as we dive into a little history on the legendary late T-Bone Walker. So today we're talking about one of the most important guitar players who ever lived. Someone who influenced names like B.B. King, Chuck Berry, Eric Clapton, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jimi Hendrix. And if you've ever wondered where modern electric blues and really rock guitar itself began, the trail leads to one man, Mr. T-Bone Walker. Aaron Thibault Walker was born May 28, 1910, in Linden, Texas, but he grew up in Dallas in a household filled with music. His parents were musicians, and his stepfather played in the Dallas String Band. By the time T-Bone was a teenager, he could play guitar, banjo, mandolin, violin, ukulele, bass, and piano. One of the most fascinating stories from his childhood is that he actually worked as a guide for the legendary blind Lemon Jefferson, leading the nearly blind bluesman through the streets of Dallas from gig to gig. Now imagine being a young kid absorbing that kind of music firsthand. It was definitely an education no school could provide. So by the 1930s, Walker started combining traditional Texas blues with the sophisticated harmony of jazz and the rhythmic drive of swing music. And while many blues guitarists of the day were accompanying singers with simple rhythm parts, T-Bone wanted the guitar to become a lead voice. And his biggest musical influences included, of course, Blind Lemon Jefferson, Lonnie Johnson, Charlie Christian, and swing horn players of the day, especially sax and trumpeters. Instead of thinking like a guitarist, Walker thought like a horn player. His solos were melodic, fluid, and full of elegant phrasing. He used string bends, vibrato, and single note lines that sounded remarkably modern for the early 1940s. Many historians consider him the first great electric blues soloist. T-Bone wasn't just a great player, he was one of the first true guitar showmen. Long before Hendrix, long before Chuck Berry's Duck Walk, before flashy arena rock, Walker was playing behind his back, doing the splits, dancing across the stage, and even playing with his teeth. And these stage moves became part of rock and roll history decades later because younger players started copying him. One thing that stands out when you watch T-Bone Walker is how he held the guitar. He wore it high on his body, but instead of angling the neck upward, he often kept it almost perfectly flat, nearly parallel to the floor. And that relaxed posture, combined with his smooth, horn-inspired phrasing, gave his playing an effortless elegance that became one of his trademarks. Walker broke through nationally in the 1940s. His biggest recordings include Call It Stormy Monday, probably the most famous electric blues song ever recorded, T-Bone Shuffle, Mean Old World, Every Day I Have the Blues, and Cold, Cold Feeling. Stormy Monday in particular became one of the most recorded blues songs ever, covered famously by the Allman Brothers Band and a who's who of blues and blues rock musicians over the decades. Throughout his career, Walker worked alongside many of the biggest names in jazz and blues. He performed with or appeared alongside artists including Count Basie, Cab Calloway, Lionel Hampton, Dizzy Gillespie, and Billie Holiday. His ability to move comfortably between blues and jazz made him unique amongst guitarists of his era. It's almost easier to list the blues players that he didn't influence. B.B. King often said hearing T-Bone Walker changed his life. In his autobiography, he wrote, "Jesus himself had returned to earth playing electric guitar. I became his disciple." Chuck Berry credited Walker as one of his two greatest influences, saying virtually everything he did on stage came from watching T-Bone. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame notes that Walker's influence extends directly to Eric Clapton, Stevie Ray Vaughan, B.B. King, Chuck Berry, Jimi Hendrix, and that's really just scratching the surface. There are so many more. Steve Miller even recalled that when he was just 8 years old, T-Bone personally taught him how to play behind his back, and even with his teeth. Because he was one of the very first electric blues stars, Walker played several groundbreaking instruments. Early on, he used a Gibson ES-250, one of Gibson's pioneering electric archtops. It became one of the first guitars heard delivering extended electric blues solos. In 1949, he switched to what became his signature guitar, the Gibson ES-5N. This beautiful blonde 3-pickup hollow body was Gibson's first production guitar with 3 pickups. Walker used it for much of the 1950s and 60s, and it became one of the most iconic guitars in blues history. Regarding his amplifiers, documentation from this era isn't as complete as it is today, but Walker was commonly associated with Gibson combo amplifiers during his early career, and then Fender tube amplifiers as they became available in the 50s. Clean, dynamic amplification that let his sophisticated phrasing shine. And unlike later blues players who embraced heavy overdrive, T-Bone preferred a warm, articulate tone with plenty of headroom, allowing every bend and jazz-inspired phrase to be heard clearly. And T-Bone almost certainly used medium gauge strings, probably somewhere around 11 to 50 or 12 to 52, because those were the standard gauges for professional electric guitarists in the 40s and 50s, especially those playing large Gibson archtops. Lighter rock gauges like 9s and 10s didn't become common until the 60s and 70s. And one important detail, the plain G string. One setup detail is documented by fellow blues guitarist Lowell Fulson. He recalled that T-Bone was amongst the first players to replace the traditional wound G string with a plain G, making bends and vibrato much easier. Fulson said, instead of a wrapped G, he used a plain one. Mostly all blues players went to it, and this was a major innovation, because before that most guitar sets had a wound third string, which made expressive bends way more difficult. Many historians credit T-Bone with helping popularize the plain G string amongst blues guitarists. And if you wanted to recreate his setup today, a very authentic modern setup would be strings 11 to 50 or 11 to 49 nickel round wounds with a plain G string, a Gibson ES-5 or an ES-250 or another full hollow body with P90s, a Fender Bassman or vintage style Fender tube combo, and effects? None. Just guitar straight into the amp with the volume turned up enough to produce a little natural tube compression. When people talk about the birth of rock guitar, names like Chuck Berry or Jimi Hendrix usually come up first. But almost every one of those legends points backwards another generation to T-Bone Walker. He showed that an electric guitar could sing. He proved it could be the star of the band. He transformed blues from rhythm accompaniment into expressive lead guitar. Without T-Bone Walker, there probably wouldn't be B.B. King. And without B.B. King, there may never have been Eric Clapton, Stevie Ray Vaughan, or countless others. His fingerprints are everywhere. If you've never really listened to T-Bone Walker, like I hadn't, start with Call It Stormy Monday, T-Bone Shuffle, and Mean Old World. You'll hear ideas that still show up in blues, jazz, rock, and even modern fusion guitar. Sometimes the most influential players aren't the loudest or the fastest. They're the ones who changed the direction of music forever. And T-Bone Walker certainly did exactly that. And if you enjoyed learning a little bit about the legendary late T-Bone Walker, make sure and share this episode with a guitar-playing friend. And wherever you're listening right now, please go and leave a 5-star review. It is incredibly helpful to the show and will help more people become aware of it, and I greatly appreciate that. Also, when you're on YouTube, follow me or subscribe at Shad's Guitar Show, and follow me on Instagram at Shad's Guitar Show. And never forget, the best guitar player is the one having the most fun.